point in your life start looking at this going, there's something wrong?
Well, I began by studying the JFK assassination back in the 80s, and it kind of led into other areas, but I've been immersed in that for decades, and that's still kind of my go-to topic. But once I realized that they could assassinate the president, or someone could assassinate the president of the United States like that, and the crime was never investigated, and the mainstream media never showed any interest in investigating it. In fact, all they've done is to their skepticism towards the private citizens who tried to investigate it and call them names, conspiracy theorists, and so forth. I realized pretty much anything was possible, and then the time 9/11 came around, and we realized what happened there, and the official narrative was just as full of holes as the Warren Report was. At this point, I'm not responsible for the people that misrule us.
Now, during the JFK assassination, what were you like, the Perry Olson? I mean, were you a junior reporter? I mean, my gosh, how old were you?
Well, I was a teenager, and at the Kennedy assassination, I was 7 when it happened. I was born in '56, so I was a teenager. Became really interested in it. I joined Mark Lane, who wrote Rush to Judgment. I joined his group. He had a group called Citizens Committee of Inquiry back in the mid-1970s, and we attempted to lobby Congress, and I was fresh off of Watergate, and I actually thought at that time naively that some Woodward and Bernstein would really break this open. You know, if they broke up Watergate, they must really be interested in the assassination of a president. But I was really disillusioned, you know, when I tried to contact reporters to see that wall that was up there, that they had absolutely no interest in it at all, and they still don't.
No, not at all. Let's get into some of these modern crimes and conspiracies, and then see if we
can see through this. They, no matter how blatant they get, the vast majority just, you know, doesn't seem to notice.
Well, maybe because they believe the media generally is gullible?
Oh, sure. I think at this point they would be shocked if the mainstream media ever investigated anything of substance. I mean, they certainly haven't. I mean, it's just amazing that they have no inquisitiveness, no journalistic zeal. You know, there are no Lois Lanes out there. I mean, there's or Jimmy Olsen, like you said. Nobody is out there wanting to get a story unless it's something, you know, maybe it's a locally used car dealer or something like that. But nothing of substance. I mean, all you have to do is watch any presidential press conference. It's a calling card that we saw when the one of the alleged hijackers 9/11, where his passport was found on a pile of rubble, and everything else was you know, obliterated in the dust. Somehow that passport survived, and it's almost as if they're bragging about it. They want to know, yeah, we did it. What are you going to do about it? And there's so few of us apparently that see through this. That it appears to be an unending war against an enemy that's unidentifiable. I mean, the enemy that's everywhere and anywhere at the same time, and certainly that's what came out of 9/11, not to mention the odious Patriot Act, Homeland Security, and you know, eventually resolving in the NDAA later. I mean, all that came out of this idea that there are these hidden forces, these cells that are everywhere that can possibly you know, bomb us again at any minute. And that's why it's so important to look at what really happened on September 11th, 2001. And when you look at that again, there are 19 hijackers, you know, armed with box cutters and plastic knives. It just doesn't. To me, it's the craziest conspiracy theory anyone could come up with. And you throw in the fact that, you know, the idea that we had planes flying around in the air that they knew were hijacked for over an hour, and you know, the last plane that hit anything was Flight 77 into the Pentagon. Here it's flying, heading towards the head of not only our defense establishment, but the greatest defense establishment that's probably ever been built by mankind, and with cameras everywhere and top security. And somehow, not only did they fail to take any action at all against it, but it isn't even filmed, and that's just impossible to believe.
Well, I mean, or they don't release it because there is something on video they won't let us see it.
Right, exactly. So if it was filmed, we haven't seen it yet, and you know, they belatedly years later, after, you know, confiscating the video from the gas station nearby and hotel nearby, they released some ridiculous video that it just shows a fireball, doesn't show anything else, and yet the mainstream media released that and acted as if, oh, the conspiracy theorists, the truthers have finally been quieted because here's the video. It's like, what? It's a fireball. You can't see anything. You don't know what hit it. So, yeah, I mean, it's just so full of holes. I mean, just the idea that, to give you an idea of how dishonest the media is on this, I mean, we know, if you look at any scientific source anywhere, you know, that steel doesn't melt until it gets to 1,535 degrees Celsius. Yet outlets like the BBC could confidently report, as if they were, quieting the naysayers by saying that, the temperatures got up to 800 degrees Celsius in the World Trade Center, which of course was hot enough to melt steel. When they know that it's twice as much it would take, almost 1,535 degrees Celsius, almost twice as much to melt steel, and there's no way temperatures, they admit temperatures never got that hot in there. So how did these things melt? How did these huge buildings come down like that? It's unprecedented. As far as I know, and I believe no one is found to the contrary, there were no buildings that have ever, no high skyscrapers that have collapsed from, metal skyscrapers that collapsed from fire before 9/11, and none have since. And yet 3 did that day, including, of course, Building 7, which so many of us say is the key to it because it wasn't hit by anything, and yet it collapsed. And these are the kind of things that professional journalists, that should be the story of the century for them, but they have no interest at all in it. The only interest they have is in calling you names if you bring it up.
Well, let me ask you, Donald,